Welcome back. Welcome back. Your man Diamond K in here. The Diamond K Show this election night. A lot of surprises out there. One of the races that we have been watching in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin wins the Virginia governor's race. There is a very tight battle right now for the New Jersey governor's race. A lot of things going on. So, of course, we could not wait. We had to get to this now. So many takeaways from Tuesday's elections, some bad omens for Democrats, and possibly a roadmap for Republicans. Of course, the Diamond K Show here on the all-new radioonfire.com. The off-year elections for the governor in Virginia and in New Jersey tend to receive attention, and the results are usually mined for a deeper meaning. You don't want to overthink this. But the midterm elections the following year, these races sometimes determine which party is going to control Congress. And I think that the lack of cohesiveness for the party that is in charge of Congress right now, nonetheless, it being a narrow margin, but the inability of Democrats to get things done, I think, had a direct effect on some of Tuesday's results. Democrats see their worst fears come true in Virginia. The worst fears, of course, being that they're on course for a 2010-like beatdown in next year's midterm elections. That was something that was predicted. That is something that by Tuesday's results could be in the future. So Glenn Youngkin, as we reported, won the governor's race in Virginia. Virginia is a place that the Democrats were expected to win, and they did not. It's often talked about the fact that President Biden won Virginia by 10 percentage points just a year ago. And if the Democrats cannot muster up, generate, elicit more enthusiasm than their gubernatorial candidate, Terry McAuliffe, did, then they're just going to be swept out of Congress, definitely swept out of power in Congress. Some things have to change. He made some mistakes, Terry McAuliffe, and you can make mistakes in elections, but he made mistakes, and Glenn Youngkin capitalized on those mistakes and took this victory all the way to the top of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So Democrats have only a 5-vote margin in the House and a single vote margin in the Senate. You talk about razor thin. That is razor thin. Glenn Youngkin shows Republicans how they can manage to keep Trump at arm's length, but yet embrace him at the same time. He was able to build a coalition. So Youngkin is an outsider. He's a former private equity executive, and he presented himself as a non-threatening suburban dad in a fleece vest. He did embrace Trump, and he did that enough to win the primary. He was able to get the MAGA crowd or the base revved up, But he was also able to target some of those moderate voters that voted for Biden last year. He talked about fiscal management, investing in schools, and campaign without Trump there to his benefit. There's also the controversy about schools and critical race theory, et cetera, et cetera. So he did not run a perfect campaign, but he did do what was necessary to win. Surprisingly, Younkin's arm's length approach to Donald Trump didn't hurt him with the Republican voters in Virginia. Did not. So look for more Republicans next year to try to model themselves after Younkin, to try to duplicate the swag that Younkin showed. So they're not going to disavow Trump, but they're not going to, pull him in for a hug too closely either. And they're going to tailor those messages to both the president's most hardcore voters, but also those independents, those folks in the middle. Of course, you're just tuning in. Your man Diamond K in here. We are talking about the election 2021. We're talking about the the trouble, the bellwether, as he liked to say, that Democrats should be facing. It is something that I think really you can point to a lot of the ineffectiveness, the fact that they can't get things done. Does this mean that Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema hurt things? Does it mean that they were spot on, that the Democrats are going too far to the left? I think that time is going to tell. But some more takeaways: targeting education on race. This is something that has been in the news. This is something that came up in the Virginia race, something that's coming up in a lot of places across the country. Education. What is being taught in schools to our children? That is something, the funding, public schools, hot button issues like race, like transgender rights, the banning of the teaching of critical race theory in Virginia classrooms, even though it's not part of the secondary school curriculum. Critical race theory is an academic framework. This framework centers on the idea that racism is systemic in the nation's institutions and that they function to maintain the dominance of white people. So some want this taught, some do not. So that there is the source of division. In recent months, it has really become a political buzzword for any teaching in schools about race and American history. So it has just become one of those trigger words that folks tend to focus on. So there have been lengthy school closures during the pandemic that made some traditionally Democratic voting groups and conservatives targeted school board races nationwide, mask ruling, the masking for COVID-19 protection and just racial justice issues, whether these things should be taught in school. So this is something that really weighed heavily on this Virginia race, and folks use the parents should have some say so in what is taught. I mean, are parents talking about what math problems are being taught? Are parents talking about what science topics should be covered? No, but this critical race theory is something that politicians have been able to work into things to rile up the base and get folks out. So, liberal voting laws aren't bad for the GOP. It seems like that. Trump in 2020 attacked efforts to expand ballot access during the pandemic. He spreaded these baseless claims of fraud. But of course, where Republicans are winning, like in Virginia, they're not talking about stop the steal now. Now, all of a sudden, everything is working fine, right? It is easier now to vote than it ever has been. And Republicans are conveniently fine with these results. They're not going to have any recounts in Virginia because they got the result that they wanted. Speaking of results, in New Jersey, Democrats need to be nervous. This was a big governor's race, and Democratic Governor Phil Murphy was favored to win. Nobody was even talking about this race. But the Republican Jack Setterelli, this race, as of right now, it is 1:45 a.m. on the East Coast. The race is still too early to call. This is not something that folks were expecting. Democrats were looking to the Garden State for hopeful signs. They were looking to the Garden State for some type of a get back, but quickly they were disappointed because this race in New Jersey has turned into a nail biter. So the race remained too tight to call as we were going on air, with just 84% of the vote in right now. It is neck and neck, with both candidates having 49.6% of the vote. Still too tight to call. Now, I don't want people to overinterpret things. That it is still 1 year before Election Day 2022. So Tuesday's results hold some clues as to what could happen. But, folks, these are just clues. So the New Jersey race, it is it's too early to call. We're talking about New Jersey. We're not talking about Virginia. Of course, we talked about the fact that Younkin won Virginia, but in New Jersey, it is still too close to call. So Democrats, I mean, you got lessons. You have you have writing on the wall. You have some things that need to change. You have a president in Joe Biden who is weak, but America needed and wanted someone who was moderate, someone who was not going to ruffle a lot of feathers after the turmoil that was 4 years of Trump. So we got and usually get the government that we deserve. We got Joe Biden, right? Was he the best candidate? No. Was he the best candidate after Trump? Probably. But a lot of things that were set into motion, Biden does not have the strength, the kahunas to even handle. So you have Democrats running amok. They can't even get along to order lunch, right? That's how confused and at each other's throats Democrats are. So I don't know what the future holds for the Democratic Party. But it is still 1 year before Election Day 2022. So two of the biggest drags on the Democrats currently is, the persistence of the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain problems. These problems have pushed up prices. Now, things could improve over the next year, or they could worsen. And if they do not improve, this is going to reflect very poorly on Democrats. There are signs that Democrats could pass Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. Republicans have been trying to hinder anything from happening just for the reason that we're seeing things tonight. I do have to say that the failure in Virginia for Democrats also can fall squarely on the lap of Joe Biden. The president is not, I mean, what is his approval is what, in the 40s? I mean, that is definitely a reflection of him, his leadership, the lasting impact of COVID-19, his inability to get something done. And, he can't control the Democrats. He can't control the Democrats. So there's a lot to take from this. But it's possible that the infrastructure and the social safety net legislation could pass soon. It's possible. Forecast, at least most Wall Street forecasters are calling for robust growth next year. If that happens, that is a good sign for Democrats. If things continue to be the same, if the pandemic continues to rage on, if supply chain problems continue to jack up prices, and that works out good for Republicans. So the results of tonight, it's no way can we say that things are definitive. A lot can happen in the next year, and more than likely, a lot of things will happen. A lot of things will happen. So I don't want Democrats to get too far down on themselves, and I don't want Republicans to get too far up on things. So it is still a lot of room for things to happen. Of course, Eric Adams winning in New York, no surprise there. A lot of things. Former congressman wins Staten Island Borough president's race. So we have that. Of course, Younkin's victory speech promises to embrace parents in schools. He sounded like a Republican that we were used to hearing. This is prior to Trump coming in and changing the way that Republicans sound. It was, I don't want to say refreshing, but I do think that it was good to hear some of the things that he was saying. I mean, he sounded like a normal person. And one thing that I did respect about Youngkin is that his speech, his message tonight was centered where it should be, which is Virginians. He thanked his wife, thanked his kids, and he said that this was a defining moment. The future governor said, together, we will change the trajectory of this Commonwealth, he said. And friends, we are going to start that transformation on day one. There is no time to waste. Our kids can't wait. We work in real people time, not government time. I did like that. So on day one, we're going to work. We're going to restore excellence in our schools. So I really liked the focus on his Commonwealth Called people friends a lot. There was a lot of unity. He did build a coalition. Lieutenant governor, a black woman. That is first. That's a history making thing there. He said that this was their moment. I guess about 30 or 40 minutes ago in New Jersey, Governor Murphy acknowledged that the night had been a lot longer than expected. He seemed to be upbeat, but he is clearly concerned, and he should be worried. But worried for the outcome. But I mean, there's nothing you can do about it now. It is going to be what it is. It's going to be what it is. Although the state of New Jersey had once been considered an easy victory for Democrats, it is definitely not that anymore. So, on a night that Michelle Wu has won the Boston mayoral race. So she is the first Asian American and the first woman to lead the city of Boston. Congratulations to her. What we deserve is a Boston where all of us are seen, heard, treasured, and valued, Wu said in her victory speech, a Boston for everyone. Wu is a Chicago native, moved to Boston to attend Harvard as an undergrad. She also holds a Harvard law degree. So across the country in Minneapolis, a ballot measure to dismantle police is rejected, thankfully. That is not something that needs to happen. And while there is frustration with police in some cities, while there is need for change, there is never going to be the need to dismantle the police. We need to change things where they're wrong, but getting rid of the police is absolutely not the answer. So this vote means that the Department of Public Safety will not be created, and Minneapolis Police Department will remain on the city charter as it should. So the ballot measure had proposed replacing the police department with a newly created Department of Public Safety. This, of course, after the tragic murder of George Floyd, killed while in police custody last year. Of course, you know about that. We spoke about Eric Adams earlier winning the New York City mayor's race. And of course, that was something that we predicted. And there are no surprises there. You may have Dominic K in here at the Dominic K Show at Radio on Fire. Of course, we're going to be following this dead heat in New Jersey's governor's race. Less than 2,000 votes currently separate the candidates, and that is definitely something that we were not expecting. So we're going to continue to follow that, and of course, tomorrow we should know the winners by tomorrow morning. So I will be back at that time to talk more about this. A lot of things to take away from this. Progressives, moderates, Democrats, y'all really need to get y'all stuff together, because the Republicans have seemingly found a way to beat you, take some of their voters back, or take some of the voters back that are up for grabs. And, I really hope that the arrogance, the elites that are in the Democratic Party pay attention to what is happening. I really hope that that is what's going to happen. Now, I'm not sure that that is going to happen because we've seen the elitist in the Democratic Party just turn a blind eye to a lot of these obvious things. So definitely we will be back tomorrow with, or later on this morning, with more of this. But this razor, I think the real story right here is this razor thin governor's race in New Jersey. Of course, Republicans winning the Virginia governor's race, and they are trying to win in this key race in New Jersey. Right now, it is anybody's race. We're going to continue to follow this, and I'll be back tomorrow morning with more. Hopefully, we will have a winner in New Jersey at that time on this election night in America 2021. This is yours truly, Diamond K, radioonfire.com.